Hi,
Action.
welcome back.
Thank you.
How are you?
Well, thank you. How are you? Thanks for
Fantastic.
joining
Best days of
me.
my life. Of course. I like live here.
True.
Yeah,
It'd be weird if I was doing it and you were just walking.
yeah, right, right. Or like if I'm just a guest here for a half hour every week.
That was
That'd
it.
be weird.
So welcome back, Jasenia, Jose, my husband.
Hmm.
Welcome back to Drinks on Danberry.
Are we going with drinks on Danbury?
We're let us know down below if you think we should continue
You hit them
that.
with the let us know down below. That's great. We're on the other side of our table, our
It's a little
breakfast
bit different.
table. Lighting's better on this side. So we were there. Now we're here.
Dining room,
Last week you guys were there.
foyer, other living rooms over here.
Family room, kitchen to my right. Last week my left.
Okay. That makes sense.
I was giving him an idea. Pools behind them,
Yep.
etc. Front door, yada yada,
There we go.
whatever. Okay, so
So
now that
welcome
the
back.
awkwardness is out of the way, I can cross off that that's our
Awkwardness
family room
gone.
and kitchen is over there. Where do you want to start? Just take it from the top.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I thought it would be nice, and also we had a couple people ask us to share a little bit about ourselves because we kind of guess just jumped right into it
we did.
and wanted to give a little bit of background because the people that know us know, of course, our background, but new people and viewers are watching, they don't know our background when it comes to finance and why we're so heartfelt
Passionate.
about it. Yeah, that's good. So I'll give you a little bit about myself. I've been in retail banking finance for
Sure.
about 14 years now. I started literally right out of high school. Always knew I was interested in finance and accounting. So I figured why not start working at a bank. So I
Mhm.
worked at a bank. I was there for about 11 years at one specific financial institution. Started as a teller, moved to, banker and then into management. Then from there I left that and came to a new firm, which I've been here for a couple years now as a manager. I manage two different branches at the same time, so it's a little unique. And that's a little bit more about kind of overview, not really like all the details of it, of course, but kind of done every position that there is to do in a branch. And I've been a branch manager for about, I don't know, 7 years now. So I would
Congrats.
say I like it. I like it. I would say
Do
that,
you?
right?
Do you?
I was like, that's fair
No,
to
I'm saying like,
say.
do you?
Yeah, I really like it.
Yeah.
I like banking. I like finance, anything that has to do with finance, I really enjoy.
Yeah, same. I took in the game of life. You ever played the game of life
Is that the one with the spin?
with the little spinner?
Yeah.
And like you put the little pegs in the
Yeah,
car.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
In the game of life, right? You can go to college or higher education after high school, or you can just jump straight in the field. I don't know if you thought that was going to be the field you were going to work in forever, but you got lucky. I went to college 4 years, came back, had a funny story about how I ended up working at a bank, but you essentially have those 4.5 years that I was in school,
Mm-hmm.
you have them in experience I have in school. So I started working in finance 9 years ago now. I was hired as a banker. I didn't start as a teller. So I've only known banking and credit and finance and the logistics of the equation. I never knew like the fundamentals, the
What it
money
takes to run
counting.
it,
Right, right, right. Like
the cash handling,
the operation,
basically.
right? Because
Yeah,
that's all operational. And then once you get into the
100%.
banking side, it's like, oh, this is the legality of the situation. So I was at the same institution she started at for about 4.5 years, and then from there went to something a whole lot smaller and regional, a credit union. For anybody who knows what a credit union is, I was at a credit union for a little less than a year. On both occasions, I felt like, I hate to say it, but I felt like the smartest person in the room. I felt like I was too big, and the ideologies just didn't line up. So I've lived and or worked in low to moderate income neighborhoods all my life. So I wanted to go back. So I went back to a big bank in management, and now I've been in management at a top 5 bank in the U.S. for about 3 years. right?
That was nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to give it a giant overview. So we've been in finance, we've been in banking essentially almost a half our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And with that being said, I like it because it lets you, it's one of those things where similar to a doctor, you can
So
take,
sorry. If you guys notice, there's people walking dogs behind us.
those are our
If you guys
neighbors,
see it, if you guys just see it, just wanted to let you know.
little suburbia. So I like it because similar to a doctor, it's a field you can use in your personal life
Absolutely.
to whether it's grow from it, learn from it, or take advantage of the fact. You got resources and tools and conversations, but it's knowledge that you can apply to your personal life to then grow in your personal life. So once I realized that banking was essentially what I was going to be doing forever, it then spilled over into my personal life, and I was like, hey, why don't we just take the stuff we know and then not only help everybody else because we can only see so many people on a day-to-day basis, and we're limited to a small, not small, we're limited to a city in the northeastern US, or we can take it to whether it's social media, to our friends, family, and go from there, and we can benefit from it ourselves. So that's essentially how we got into banking. We got into finance. We didn't start this podcast talking about something that we know nothing about. We have these conversations every day at our table. I go to work, I have these conversations. I come home and I have dinner with a banker. essentially, that's how my life is, right? So, and that's how we got here. So to these conversations, if they seem too much lingo, too much jargon, or there's vocabulary you don't understand, that's fine. We're willing to do one a week, have these conversations and break things down. And sometimes we have to remember that we need to not dumb down the conversations, but have them in layman's terms, because we have them in terms that, like maybe the average American doesn't know. Mm-hmm. And that's hard to remember because it's the only way my brain operates. I don't know about your brain, but my brain operates in numbers and logistics. So, yeah.
Very nice.
Got that all.
Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Once again.
Anytime.
Cheers. Okay. Real estate update. Last week, where were we?
We put an offer in.
We put an offer in. So we heard back from the seller and the seller's agent. They had a price in mind. It was listed at that price. We offered less because the house has been sitting for a little while. The property, I don't want to say house. The property has been sitting for some time. So we offered less. They came back with a number less than what it was listed at, but higher than our offer. So we didn't want to get that high. So in our offer, we have what's called an escalation clause. In real estate, it's when you submit an offer, but you're telling the seller and their agent, hey, if anybody comes in with a higher offer, we'll beat them by this number every time an offer comes in up till this point, right? Mm-hmm. So,
can you give an example?
Yes. So an example would be if the property is listed at $295,000 and we submit an offer of $270,000 with an escalation clause of $285,000, it means if anybody offers anything more than $270,000 but less than $285,000, that it essentially has to come back to us to say, are you willing to go higher than what they did? Mm-hmm. If they did $275,000, we can do $277,000. If they do $280,000, we can do $282,000. Anything up until $285,000. They essentially came back and said, no, $289,000 is the lowest we'll go, right, in this case. And then what it would end up happening would be, it's on us to say, hey, okay, we don't want to offer higher than what we put our escalation clause at. So essentially it dies out, right? The offers, they don't want to budge, we don't want to budge, and that's where it stays. And essentially in our case, right, out of the example, in our case, what's going on is they had more showings
coming up
scheduled, right? And they wanted to see what those offers looked like before they came back to us and said, hey, we would take this number. And we were at a point where we did not want to submit an offer for higher than what we already did. So you get to a standstill. Now, during the standstill, we're allowed to go look. We're allowed to go look. We're allowed to keep shopping. We're allowed to submit other offers, because the minute you put in that first offer and they come back and say, no, this is what we want, it essentially throws our offer out in the sense of we're no longer binded to that offer. Right. So we're allowed to go shopping. We're allowed to keep looking. We're allowed to go to showings. So that one's not dead, but it's essentially at a standstill. Nothing's going to move, and nothing has moved since last week. And we're going to keep going to showings, and we're going to keep looking at properties. And if we find something better, cool, let our realtor know, put an offer in, call it a
there.
day, go from there. But again, this is all a part of, if you want to have the real estate conversation, it's all a part of real estate. It's all about a part of buying a house, right? It's not, I like this house, charge it like you would a pair of sneakers. It's, hey, somebody else wants this house too. Unlike a car, you can't go find the same car again. You have to essentially hope that you win that house or that property. That's how real estate works. And yeah, so that's the update on real estate. That's how we got here. So we banged out most of the conversations we had.
I think it's fair though to give just a little background on why we came in at the price that we did, even though their price was maybe here and our price that we originally offered was here. And then we did counter offer. Again, it wasn't to the price that they essentially wanted. However, for us, I think it was, we really took like an overview of really what the numbers would be, from when it would be like principal, interest, escrow, all that would come as
a whole worksheet.
Yeah, whole worksheet that you do.
Yeah.
To really understand the numbers, and especially like for us, it's an investment property. So we of course want to make sure not that we're like, we're getting all this profit, but we want to make sure at least even the mortgage can get paid. So from what the tenant for that property is paying currently, plus having to get a tenant in for the other unit and whatever, all those numbers combined together into the worksheet with what the rates are currently at the loan that we would be paying, it really comes like really close if we would have offered what they're asking for. Like in a sense of like, I mean, probably dollars that, which like, you're scraping for. So like essentially why go that high, especially if we knew that they didn't have any offers. So we would rather start lower, then counter offer little by little until it doesn't make sense for us. So we'll see what happens when they have some showings. In the meantime, like Jose said, we're still going to go to a couple more showings. We're going to see if there's anything else out there for multi-unit family properties that we like. And then, of course, if we like something, of course, we'll talk to a real estate agent, like he said, and then we'll put an offer. Until then, kind of see where we're at.
Yeah, it's two things. One, it's a different conversation if you're living in the house versus if you're not living in the house, right? That's one. The second conversation is, we're not at the point yet where we own a multi-million-dollar corporation who essentially, in theory, can you buy a property for whatever amount and then have the rents, if you're renting it, if it's an investment property, pay exactly what you needed to pay with no money coming in extra, no profit, right? It all washes. You break even, right? So if your mortgage payment is $2,000 and you got $1,500 coming in from rent and you're putting aside, $200 for future repairs, $200 for maintenance, and whatever, the extra $100 in an account just in case the house is ever vacant, you would pull it from there. And you're breaking even, right? The money that's coming in is exactly the money that's going out. You're not dishing out money. Can you do that? Absolutely. Right? Is that a risk? Absolutely. Because if it ever goes vacant before you have enough money to hold yourself over until somebody moves in, well, now you're coming out of pocket.
Right.
There's some people, corporations, whatever the case may be, you name it. There are so many angles to real estate. You can essentially just buy it, break even, and sit on the equity that you're building over time because you're technically not paying that mortgage.
Right.
Your tenant's paying your mortgage. So you're just sitting on the equity the property's building over time. That's fine. We're not there, right? So not yet. So that's a different conversation. And that's the thing about finances. My best example, I think I've told you this, the best example I give people about credit and finance and banking is if you've ever played Super Mario, right? So now we're aging ourselves.
Right.
So growing up, there was a game on the Super Nintendo gaming system, video game system, where Mario would start at point A and would end at point B. Sonic, if you ever played Sonic growing up, same thing. You start on the left, you end up on the right. The point is to get to the right, you grab a flag, and then you start from the beginning. You're back on the left, you start on the right. When we were kids, Nintendo 64 came out, and now Super Mario 64, right? And now you are Mario. You're no longer trying to move Mario on a one-dimensional screen. Now you are Mario. You can spin, you can jump in paintings, walk in rooms that are dead ends. You can go down hallways, you can go outside, you can go inside, you can fall off a cliff. That's how I see finance, right? There's a million and one ways up the mountain. Not everybody's way is going to be the same. That doesn't mean everybody's doing it differently. It's an art. Everybody does it differently. You get the results that you desire. I get the results I desire. If something doesn't work, I change the approach and call it a day. So our conversations might sound a million times different than any other conversations you hear out there. I put people on a spectrum somewhere between conservative and risky, depending on how risky you're willing to get with your money, resources, tools, you name it. You're on that scale somewhere. Some people are going to tell you, nope, I'm not taking any risks. Like, it needs to be extremely conservative. I don't want any debt. Like, I'd rather do it cash. I'll pay for the house. I'll do everything I have to do. Fine. And then the other side is, who cares? Use the bank's money. Do whatever you got to do.
Right.
So everybody falls somewhere on that spectrum. And that's,
where do we
you
lie?
just want to just go, where do we lie?
Yeah.
Where do you lie? Where do, wow, pressure. That was an impromptu question. I lean risky, but things change. Age has a lot to do with it, right? So like, I'll read about finance and I'm looking at like older people's perspectives, right? Whether it's CEOs or whether it's CFOs or you name it, anybody who leads a company and is thinking, hey, I need to make sure the economy looks great in a week because I might retire in a week. My investments that I've made need to look good in a week. I'm thinking I want to retire in like 8 years. So if I say 8 years, like I can get riskier with 8 years than that person can get with 8 years. Their picture looks different than mine. I would say if I'm on the spectrum, I'm moderately risky.
If it's here to here, he's like right there.
And I give people
right there.
and again, these are all like subjective approaches, right? These are all preferences, conversations you're hearing from two people. How we feel has nothing to do with how all of society feels or how
or how they manage their
money or people are doing okay. The way I look at it is Dave Ramsey is a great example of a conservative. And if you've ever read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that's a great example of somebody who's not risky, but they're willing to leverage debt, leverage money, right? And that's how I see it. I see it. If you're willing to do it, great. If you want to make sure you're debt free before you start investing any money, great. That's fine too. The conversation just changes depending on the person's approach. So if you just want to go into the question, right? We had our first like follower question, right? Somebody asked us, hey, when are you guys going to talk about this? Right? And I promised I wouldn't say who the person was. So we're just going to call them Kris. Okay, Kris. Kris wants to know, how's debt incorporated, right? How is debt a part of the equation? And, you know, the difference is essentially between good debt and bad debt and how much debt is okay.
Which I think that's a little
you first.
I would say how much debt is okay is a little subjective because it's all what you're comfortable with. Granted, there's good debt and bad debt. Good debt, I would say, like a home, right? You build equity. You're paying towards something versus a credit card. You are racking up debt and you already have, I don't know, what would you say, the product. So racking it up, it's just hurting you. When you pay it down, you're not really getting anything from that. So I would, how debt is incorporated, if you're going to purchase investment properties, for example, of course, it's going to come with it. Unless, of course, that you have all this cash, that you're purchasing the properties in cash. Now you're just sitting completely on equity. But again, some individuals or LLCs or corporations that purchase properties, they may use the equity from this property to purchase this property, which then they have debt leaning against, say, property A, right, to pay for property B. However, again, you're paying towards something, and when you're paying something, say, mortgage payment, right, for a property, you're paying July's payment, that goes towards your principal, interest, escrow, and principal comes down, equity goes up on how much you have available to you, right? And then, of course, obviously, the economy is a factor in there on where you're at for equity. But how much debt is okay? It's really your comfort level, because you can look at essentially how much debt we have, and someone, especially someone who's made more on the conservative side, they may look at the debt that we have and like, oh my God, you guys have so much debt. But in reality, the debt that we have, I would say, is good debt because there are properties. right? We have credit card debt. However, it's very, very minimal. It's very controllable. We can pay that off and then that's fine. So when they're looking at your overview and how much credit is okay, debt is okay to have, I think when you're going for a mortgage or even applying for, a credit card, anything of that nature, they do look to see your credit utilization, how much credit you're utilizing. But I don't think that the mortgages necessarily fall into place with that. Now, granted, if you are looking for another property and you don't have the income to suffice at least that mortgage, why would they? Then now you have too much debt, because why would they lend you more money when you may not be able to pay this property? So I'll let you go into that a little bit as well.
Okay. So you're good on that? All right, well, and it's funny because I apply logic to all my answers. I try to apply logic to all my answers. And please remember, all these answers are subjective, okay? What I think isn't necessarily, maybe she'll agree, but that doesn't mean everybody's going to agree. And that doesn't mean it's the only correct answer. The first question, how much debt is okay? That answer is subjective, and I'm going to tell you why. If I have a married couple, hypothetically speaking, married couple makes together as a household, as a unit, as a team, $250,000 a year, and all their debt combined is $1 million, you might run for the hills. I'm going to tell you 4 times their annual income is debt. Okay. That's how I'm going to look at the equation. Now, if I painted another picture and I said somebody makes $50,000 a year and they just bought a $250,000 house, that house is 5 times their income. I was looking at a married couple whose 4 times their annual income covers all their debt. Some people will say, oh, you got approved for a $250,000 house? That's fantastic. Not taking into consideration the person maybe just makes $50,000 a year. You're looking at it as congratulations. I'm looking at it as I'd rather be in the household that's bringing in $250,000 and has $1 million of total debt than has $1 million than the $50,000 household in a $250,000 house. Not to account for student loans, mortgage, credit card debt, you name it, right? So now that total debt could be like $300,000. Well, now it's 6 times their annual income. Again, I'd rather be in the household with the $250,000 with $1 million of total debt. So that how much debt is okay? That's up to you. Is it good debt? Is it bad debt? What are you using the debt for? Right? If it's bad debt, get rid of it. No. How much debt is okay? If it's good debt and you're using it and you're leveraging it and it's bringing you in money, or you know what you're using it for, that answer depends on the person, right?
How do you control your debt usage as well?
Right.
Like, so your credit usage, I think that's really important as well, because
what's it for?
Yeah, some people are like, I have available credit, let me utilize it, right? Sure. And that's okay as long as you can manage it. But if you're not managing, you're just racking that up, and then at some point you realize you're just swimming and you don't know.
Right.
You're basically just existing in the water.
That's the good debt versus bad debt, right? To me, good debt is any debt you've leveraged for something productive. You bought an asset, you bought a business, you bought real estate, you did something. That debt's going to bring money in. That's good debt. Bad debt, you used it and you don't even know where it went, right? You have $10,000 in credit card debt. Sure, what'd you do with that $10,000? You know, you might say, well, I went out to eat, I went shopping, I went on vacation. That's great, that's fantastic. You can't put a price on those experiences. I understand that. But now you have $10,000 worth of debt sitting on your credit that's not doing anything for you currently, consistently, right? So what I think is good debt is different than what you think is good debt. Any debt you can leverage for income or an asset, I consider good debt. Then you can break it down however you want, but that's essentially that. How is that incorporated? Again, if the debt's making you money, I would say go for it. I'm on the risky side. Somebody on the conservative side is going to say no, bad, bow, bow. Like, make sure you use cash to buy whatever it is you're trying to do. If you need to use debt, you can't afford it, right? You can't buy it twice. You can't afford it. Right. So that all those questions are subjective. We can give you our opinion, which we just did. If it's good debt, leverage it. You know, how much debt is okay? That's 100% based up to you. You go to a bank and they say, hey, we can't do it because your debt to income ratio is too high. That means you make too much money, but too much of it is debt, right? So it's too risky to lend you money because you already have too many commitments. Now, if you leverage debt and your income goes up, then the debt to income ratio stays low. Banks keep saying yes, right? So those questions are subjective, but we like them because it's like there's no right or wrong answer. We're not going to instill fear. I'm not going to instill fear. My answer could be right. You go to somebody else, their answer could be right, but different than mine. You go to her their answer is right, different than mine. Nobody's wrong. We just do it differently.
Absolutely.
So we got that out of the way,
Mm-hmm.
right? With like 5 minutes to spare.
Yeah.
So we can go into like fun topics, or we can just anything else on here you want to talk about before we.
No, I think that was good. I think that was a really good question.
Yeah, I like
to cover it.
The concept is, I don't. The one thing, don't be afraid of debt. That's the one thing.
Don't be afraid of good debt.
Don't be afraid of debt.